Hello and welcome to Xtalks Spotlight, illuminating insights from subject matter experts and industry thought leaders. I'm Sonia Hunt. Today's episode, we are asking the question, how are decentralization practices changing CNS clinical trials? With more, here's senior life science journalist Aisha Rashid.
Thank you, Sonia. While many patients are willing to participate in clinical trials, according to one evaluation, 70% of potential participants live more than 2 hours from a study center, creating challenges for meeting enrollment goals and study timelines, and compounding issues around diversity in clinical trial participation. To help address these challenges and others, clinical research teams are embracing decentralized clinical trial activities, progressing well beyond the initial inflection of pandemic-related mitigation strategies. In this discussion, our featured guest speaker will discuss both the unique challenges and important opportunities afforded from remote administration of clinical outcome assessments. We're delighted to have Rachel Colite, Vice President of Decentralized Clinical Trials at Cogstate, with us for this edition of Xtalks Spotlight to speak about decentralization practices in CNS clinical trials and how they are evolving. Thank you for taking the time for this Spotlight interview, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Aisha. Really pleased to be here.
So Rachel, I'd like to start off by asking, COVID-19 accelerated the adoption of decentralized clinical trials in the biopharma industry. Was Cogstate involved in remote testing prior to the pandemic? And how is your team supporting decentralized trials now?
So Cogstate's focused on measuring cognition and development and behavior in clinical trials. And prior to the pandemic, we were measuring these endpoints in many instances remotely, but we've just seen a real uptick in the number of trials and sponsors in different disease areas that are interested in taking this approach since the pandemic. There are two main ways that we support remote administration. One is through our digital cognitive tests. So we have a full suite of computerized endpoints that are highly automated in terms of administration and scoring, and web-based, which makes them really ideal for that at-home testing use case. These have been widely adopted in areas such as academic research and clinical trials for trial designs where sponsors need to test a large number of participants over sometimes a long period of time, but need validated, reliable endpoints that can really scale up for those types of applications. The other area of our business where we do remote assessment is rater-administered assessments. And this is what we call central rating, where a Cogstate clinician or psychometrician is connecting with a participant via telehealth and conducting more of an interview-based assessment. And again, these use cases, we've seen a lot of adoption in our rare disease clinical trials where the participants can be quite geographically dispersed and have to travel long distances in order to get to a clinical trial site. And some of them are quite impaired, making the travel for the family really challenging. And so these types of trials have for quite some time now adopted remote assessment and central rating approaches. And now since the pandemic, we're just seeing a lot of other sponsors and trials adopting these types of at-home testing approaches.
What benefits are being seen by sponsors, sites, and patients from decentralized clinical trials?
I think many in the industry appreciate that if you can reduce the number of times a participant has to travel into a trial site, you can potentially make the trial more attractive to the participant. So thereby increasing your recruitment and retention in the trial, attracting a more diverse and representative patient population. But with respect to central nervous system disorders in particular, or cognitive assessments in particular, there's some additional data quality benefits as well. And in these trials, we tend to train raters, sometimes hundreds of raters, for a large phase 3 program. And we go to great lengths to train them on a standardized way of administering the assessments and then monitoring them quite closely to ensure that they are able to administer these assessments in a very standardized way. So with central rating, when you're using a really small pool of highly calibrated, highly trained raters, you're able to control for some of that variance and really concentrate some of your training and data quality resources in a way that really makes an impact. And so we're seeing many sponsors who are interested in taking these approaches, not only for those patient centricity benefits, but also for the data quality benefits.
And what are some of the challenges to address in decentralized clinical trials?
So there certainly are challenges. I'll try to focus on one that's particularly potent in cognitive assessment for remote decentralized data collection. And that's endpoint selection. I think it's really critical to select endpoints that lend themselves to remote administration. So that could be digital endpoints that are fully automated and web-based. That could be clinical interviews or clinical assessments that are really interview-based or patient-reported outcomes. Where we see challenges is really with respect to the manipulatives that are required. So where assessments that require a lot of physical manipulatives be exchanged between the participant and the rater, those can present some particular challenges, or where the data collection has some unique requirements, such as drawing items. Again, these aren't insurmountable by any means, but they do require some pretty specific considerations with respect to the technology that's used. So I would just say picking endpoints that are really fit for purpose and really lend themselves to this approach, I think is an important way to overcome some of the challenges that we see.
And finally, Rachel, what are some of the key considerations for success in a decentralized trial?
Yeah, there's a couple of key success considerations, I think. One would be around bringing vendor partners together very early. It's important in any clinical trial, but I think it's doubly so in a decentralized clinical trial. They tend to be very tech-enabled. There's a lot of technology, a lot of e-clinical technologies from especially when cognitive assessment is included. So I think bringing these groups together and making sure that they have a capability and an expertise for either integrating or really tightly orchestrating their delivery. And that's something Cogstate spent. We've spent a lot of time and investment on ensuring that we have an API infrastructure that lends itself to partnerships, as well as how we've designed some of our workflows. So I think that's going to become really central. We have to work together to deliver these trials. There really is no single vendor who can do it all. And so I think we have to have a real capability around coming together early and partnering deep partnerships to deliver these types of trials. The other is about site enablement. I think these sites are taking on a tremendous amount of new work, uncharted territory. Oftentimes these are hybrid, almost all of the times these are hybrid trials that have a site-based component in addition to the remote data collection. And it's oftentimes the sites that are still the main point of contact for the participant in terms of prepping them for doing their at-home data collection. And so just making sure that these sites have the resources they need and are well supported and trained and enabled to do these new activities, I think is going to be a really important thing to pay attention to make sure these trials are successful, and to make sure that we can still maintain that high personal connection with the participants throughout these trials, and that these at-home data collection approaches really do improve their experience in the trial and that it doesn't hinder it.
Thank you very much, Rachel, for those very important and interesting insights.
Well, thank you again for having me, Aisha. It was a real privilege to have the opportunity.
We look forward to keep learning more about Cogstate's innovative initiatives in the CNS clinical trial space. Thank you all for joining us for this Xtalks Spotlight feature. We hope you enjoyed the show.